The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated.
Welcome back to the Nova Society. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with my panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Mark Bound. And we have our guest again with us today, Dr. Jared O. Bell. Today we will be answering listener emails, and we have a question from Kim, who lives in Toronto, Canada. And Kim asks, it's being reported that there is a trade deal with Japan. The BBC is reporting that the U.S. Treasury has hauled in over $100 billion from tariffs. This seems like a big win for the Trump administration, even though the U.S. dollar is slumping. Do you think others will also buckle under? The EU, Canada, the rest of the world? I know the panel has said tariffs are a bad idea, but if the results continue and other nations bend to Trump's will, what might all this mean for global economics and the world order? That is an excellent question, Kim.
This is a really good question, and I just want to say that Pete Alonso just hit a 3-run homer, and the Mets are up.
Important news.
5-1 in the third. All right. So, with that happy note, let's talk a little bit about this Japanese deal that Trump made, because one of the things that it includes is a $500 or $550 billion sovereign wealth funds to be controlled by Trump himself, which he has discussed in the past, sovereign wealth fund. And he really likes that idea, as you can imagine. And it just seems to me one step closer to that rentier state that I think we are becoming, and that I think he really wants to be the leader of, because you can already see the rent seekers beginning to gather themselves up to head to the White House to say, hey, that $550 billion that you got from Japan, what are you going to do with that anyway? Maybe I have some ideas that we could use that money for. And that's a real scary proposition. The other part of it I'll say is this, and I'll let the others speak. Prices are going up. GM lost a lot of money, 35% of their profits, I think, lost in the last quarter. Walmart has decided that it needs to raise prices on certain things. Amazon is raising prices. So we're seeing spikes already. And for the most part, we're still dealing with pre-tariff inventory. Once that pre-tariff inventory goes away or is used up, the next shipments that start coming over are going to be very expensive. And when Scott Bessent was asked about it today, he said that corporations are going to need to eat these tariffs and take less profit. Trump, on the other hand, has said that the manufacturers overseas are going to have to eat those profits. But what really seems to be happening, as anyone with a brain in their head could predict, is they're passing the pain along to consumers, and consumers are paying the freight of these tariffs. And I do believe that was the plan all along.
Well, as you know, whenever we talk about economics, I look at it a lot like if you're a meteorologist, it's wizardry. I don't think you can get all a bunch of economists or weathermen in the same room and have them come up with the same conclusions. Yeah, I did see, and when I was reading this, Kim, I did go on to the BBC, and yeah, the BBC is touting that this is a victory for Trump, and the BBC is saying that this is actually working. As a matter of fact, I also went over to CNN, who put out a article basically saying that it appears, and remember the word appears, that the Trump economic tariffs are working. Everybody, though, points to the fact, just like Scott said, short term. Now, that's kind of the economics end of it, and I'll kind of leave it at that part. I think the thing that disappoints me about this whole thing is Japan. About last week, we had a podcast where we were talking about the response of the Prime Minister of Japan to these tariffs, basically saying Japan won't back down. The hell with you. We're not going to back down. And now it appears they have. That concerns me. Because if Japan had stuck by its guns, and let's keep in mind, I think it's this week, the EU economic leaders are supposed to be meeting in Japan. So all the EU and the Brits and them are going to be meeting in Japan to discuss, this tariff situation. If Japan isn't on board, that kind of cuts into what they can actually do. I would have liked to have seen the world stand up. And, as I've said, if they did, they'd be a very powerful force and would be able to knock a lot of this back down. But with Japan apparently capitulating, and I'm just going to say this apparently, because there is no real specifics in what I'm reading as to what this deal is. It may be being made out to be more than it is. I don't know. I think we're going to find out more probably in the coming days. But for right now, and I'm sure another listener will write in about it when we do have more information, and we'll address it. But the fact is right now I'm really not sure where it sits. And the BBC, again, you're right, is claiming that it's a victory. But I didn't see anything on the CBC, the Canadian broadcast. So again, I just, it's hard for me at least, to come up with some sort of an answer to this. My disappointment is if this has truly happened to the extent that the BBC says it has happened, I am hugely disappointed in Japan. And I think that is, you're probably right. It's probably a win for the Trump administration, because without Japan, I don't know if the rest of the world can do it.
But one thing to point out, though, this success for the Trump administration, like, I think people are forgetting that these tariffs are being paid for by American companies and by American consumers. Like, Japan isn't paying, millions of dollars into the U.S. Treasury. Like, this is what people, I think, don't get. The idea behind tariffs in general was ridiculous when Trump was touting how much money we'd be getting, and we'd have so much money. I mean, we'd have so much money. But wait a minute. Who's paying for that? It's the American consumer. It's the American company that's paying for this. So, and to answer the question in the long term, outside of international aid and military aid and foreign assistance, what draws our allies near to us and what buys us capital throughout the world is trade. And when we start, wrestling with that, and we start trying to, make that subject for domestic politics, but this is what it is. This is about politics and not about strategy in the end, right? Trump is touting the America first, and so we're going to, all these people have been taking advantage of America so very, very badly, but where's the strategy in this? And what are we getting? Excuse me, but we're literally pissing off our allies or the people who are closest to us, because trade is what buys us capital beyond the other things that I mentioned. And so, this comes back to this idea of, it's hard to answer where this is going to go because, in our lifetime, we haven't seen this kind of isolationism in the United States, right? To where we're kind of wrestling with, our tariffs and putting tariffs on Canada, for God's sakes, and Mexico, countries we have trade agreements with. So I don't think it bodes well for the U.S. position globally, just like, the destruction of U.S. aid, or, can't think of a number of other, trade is another form of soft power that I don't think people realize that in the United States, we use it a lot. But there's a lot of capital around the world.
Yep.
This idea of winning. So my guess is that I haven't read the BBC article or editorial, whatever it is. But of course, Japan's in a very poor position in that they don't have like the same kind of economy that we have, where 2/3 of our economy is based on U.S. consumers. Japan relies on imports and exports more than most countries do. It always has. It's why they fought World War II. And so what's unclear to me is why a tariff that went from 1.6%, which it was in January, to now 15%, which is going to cost U.S. consumers, 10 times the amount of money that they had, assuming that these tariffs are being paid by U.S. consumers, and how that is a good deal for U.S. consumers. Somebody's going to have to sit me down and explain this to me. Now, there is there is the sovereign wealth funds, right? Which does it invest an enormous amount of capital into the United States from Japan. That's I guess a good deal for the United States, although it has implications for the strength of the dollar that I don't think Trump foresaw or understands. And what I do think is that if consumers here are paying what it looks like it's going to be essentially $300 billion more for Japanese goods, I just don't see it being a big win for America. Might be a big win for Trump personally, that he was able to bully Japan into making this deal and agreeing to invest that kind of money, but the consumers are still the ones who are going to pay for it. And of course, Japan, here's another part that I don't really understand the logic of it. Most Japanese car companies build cars here in the United States, right? You can buy the same exact car, Japanese car, and the difference in price would be whether it was made in the United States or made in Japan and shipped over here. Same exact car. Car parts and stuff like that will, of course, be more expensive. That's going to be a big hit on people. But Trump approved a deal with Japan that they can buy a U.S. steel, and as long as they make the steel here, they can avoid tariffs on the steel. But the money still goes back to Japan. So I don't understand the logic of these deals. To me, the best thing that ever could have happened in the world are these zero tariff, total free trade deals that, yes, could mean that we're building things overseas instead of here in the United States, but the consumers are at least protected from them. Again, it's a little over my head.
But I think that's an excellent point, Scott. Look, I think American, and this is why, being a part of UNESCO and many other international organizations and removing us from these things puts us at a disadvantage because, outside of the trade aspect is educating ourselves. And, look, we have to, the United States has to get to a point to realize, and middle America, again, I'm from Western Pennsylvania, the blue collar jobs they're fastly fading away. And so we need to figure out how do we, and, who was Howard Lutnick saying that, we need to, if Scott be sent, we're going to be building factories. Factories aren't coming back, right? People aren't going to make a living that way. So we need to focus on and put ways of how do we educate Americans, whether it be AI, how to fix computers, and so this is what the problem is that this America First agenda isn't actually putting Americans first, especially as we're trying to eliminate the Department of Education, right? So we have to really stop and think about what this means in terms of trade and jobs in the United States, because Japan's going to move forward, right? China's moving forward, and the United States isn't. And unfortunately, we have to have an honest conversation with middle America, or those Americans who voted for Trump, and I think who feel like they're left behind, right? Who feel like, okay, the United States is no longer for me, and this is why Trump appeals to me, because I wanted an America where, well, let's be honest, it was white and focused on Christian values, but I also wanted an America where there were opportunities that I can get. That was partly, again, pushed on the fact that people were white and there was limited competition at some points in history, recent history. But I think that a big part of that is about focusing on the trade discussion has to be held about education as well, because we don't have that, America's not competing, and I think people are feeling that.
Yeah. Well, I think the reason believe it or not, in economics, I'm going to disagree a little bit with Scott here. As far as Japan not being in a good position, Japan holds $1.12 trillion in U.S. debt. That is more than China. That's almost a fifth of all U.S. debt is held by Japan. China holds a little over 900 billion, and the rest of the world, all combined, have like 5 trillion of U.S. debt. I would think that's a pretty good bargaining chip if you're Japan. We hold $1.12 trillion in your debt, and I think that's why I was so disappointed in Japan in capitulating to this. I mean, again, I'm not an economist, never desired to be an economist. I know a couple of economists, but I would think that if you owed me, if I owned, the debt on your house, I must have some pull somewhere. I mean, it just kind of goes with reason. And Japan didn't seem to want to use that. And it's all about rice, but they could have gotten rice somewhere else. That's the whole point. Of course, that's what they're saying it's about. We'll see.
Right.
We'll see what it goes.
And they claim that they weren't buying rice, but they have been buying rice.
They have been buying rice. Yes, they have been. But I mean, Scott, you are far more up on economics than I am. $1.12 trillion, isn't that a big bargaining chip?
Yes, it is. and they gave us a chance, right? God, what was it? March. There was a concerted effort on the part of Carney, the PM of Canada, to all of a sudden sell off all this U.S. debt, and there was a big jolt in the economy, the what do you call it? Bond market, plummeted or skyrocketed. I don't know whichever way you want to look at it. It was a huge disruption, and it was apparently just a sign or a threat that they could start selling their dollars off and calling in their debt, and that would be a horrible thing for the Americans. But I mean, even this deal, when you look at, I'm just like scrolling through some of the implications that it has for, let's say, car dealers, right? So right now, U.S. car dealers, U.S. car manufacturers, American companies are getting screwed by this deal because they've got a 25% tariff on cars that they make in Canada, in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, compared to Japan's 15% rate. So there are going to be more Toyotas, Hondas, and Nissans sold here than there are American cars, because they'll be so much less expensive. And I don't know. It's the whole thing just seems so crazy, and there's this tariff and that tariff. I really do think that the score here, and I do believe it is a score, that Trump really wanted was that sovereign wealth fund, that he's only in it because he wants people to come to him and give him large sums of money that he can deal with any way he wants to, and that gives him leverage over U.S. companies. So he's taken a slice, he's wetting his beak on both sides, and I think that's really what this is all about.
Could very well be. Well, Brooke, hopefully we answered that one.
Jerry, did you want to add anything else?
Nope. I'll just, I'm no expert on trade here, so I'm just, as you said before, I don't know, right? I just gave my 2 cents, but trade is not one of my expertise. So I was listening to you have that discussion back and forth.
I'm sure we educated you on that, since none of us know exactly what's going on.
I mean, and it changes day by day, right?
Yeah, really. I mean,
It does, and the fact of the BBC saying that this is working. Well, working for whom, and how are they defining working? And
being thrown up against the wall works.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really mean anything. I mean, is Trump getting what he wants?
Well,
I guess,
I
but
guess.
not necessarily. Not if it means, as Scott said, that American manufacturing of American vehicles is going to lead to a downturn for American companies and an upturn for Japanese-owned companies when those companies are making their vehicles here. Then everybody's competing, but American companies, when their parts are being manufactured partially in Canada and partially in Mexico, are not going to do as well. So I mean, the Trump is so overly simplistic and so reductionist, and oh, I can fix everything, and I know more about this than this person does, and I know more about that than that expert does, and he doesn't know enough about anything to do anything. It's the Dunning-Kruger knowing a tiny
Oh, yeah.
Brooklyn.
amount.
As James in Dallas will tell you, everybody knows that.
James and Dallas. So,
but I think that's go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jared.
No, I think that's an excellent. I think that's an excellent point that Brooklyn makes, is that essentially, this is all smoke and mirrors. I mean, at the end of the day, like, this is as we've seen early on in his administration, creating a problem and then fixing the problem, right? Creating the problem, fixing the problem, even though when there wasn't a problem. And I think that appeals to his base, and people who aren't going to be read on trade policy, who aren't going to understand how tariffs work. They just want to receive the information that they're done getting screwed over by foreign companies, so to speak, even though they're the ones actually paying for tariffs that American companies are, right? So he's accomplishing what he wants, and beyond the sovereign wealth fund, he's getting that bang for his buck with his base, right? Who's not going to question, who's not going to do the research, and well, wait a minute, how do tariffs really work? So I think that's a good part of it too.
Yeah. I don't know how long that he can sustain that, as long when they start seeing that their prices are going up. We made deals earlier in the week with Singapore and Indonesia, right? And we do like a certain amount of trade with Singapore and Indonesia. But one of the parts of the trade deal with those two countries that Trump was talking about was that they've removed any tariffs off of U.S. companies that are selling into those two countries. And in addition to that, they've agreed to pay, and here's where the problem becomes, they've agreed to pay a 19% tariff on goods coming from their country into here. Well, again, we know that nobody is paying that except for importers who get an invoice from the dock when the ship comes in and their stuff gets offloaded onto a truck to be delivered. That's when tariffs get paid. Always has been, right? It's always been the importers pay that tariff when their goods arrive in our country at one of our docks and are offloaded from a ship. That's when it happens. So if I understand this correctly, the per capita income in both Indonesia and in the Philippines is $4,800 per year per person. What are they buying from the U.S. that is going to make a big difference to U.S. manufacturers? This I do not know. I'm sure they have airlines that are going to pay, that are going to buy Boeing jets, for example. Maybe they're buying some Jeeps or something like that, perhaps. Their governments may buy some things, corporations may buy some things, but I still don't see where the bang for the buck is coming from when it comes to a really poor country. That's 8 times less than the per capita income here in the United States, and what it means for them to be able to buy duty-free U.S. goods. What are we selling over there? And the answer is really probably not very much. And so I think Trump misdiagnoses the problem. He probably does it on purpose because he's got people around him who understand it. But his own Treasury Secretary says that the corporations are going to pay it. He continues to insist that the countries are going to pay it. We know in reality that that importers pay it, and that we're going to get screwed one way or another. How long can his base put up with that before they don't realize everything is going up? And then Trump will say to them, yeah, but I gave you a big tax cut, so it all evens out in the end. Again, the score here seems to be in these sovereign wealth funds that he's hoping to get from every single country, so that he has a large fund to invest as he sees fit. And that is the rentier state. That is the rent seeking that he's hoping to get people to do, so he has leverage to do whatever it is that he's hoping to accomplish, be even wealthier than he was before.
I agree.
Right. Yeah, no, it's what he's doing is unsustainable. And let's not forget the small businesses who are not going to be able to pay anything like what the large corporations, Walmarts and stuff like that can do. So we're going to lose many, many small businesses, which is going to add to people filing for unemployment. It's going to add stress to the unemployment market, as well as, and all the people who have lost jobs in the federal government and every other sector, I suppose, as prices go up and as companies need to tighten up, and as there are fewer people working in building houses and in picking, harvesting crops and in so on and so forth. There are going to be fewer houses, and there's going to be more homelessness, and there will be less food and much more food insecurity, and a lot of that will affect red states.
Sounds good.
Fire and brimstone, cats and dogs living together. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, okay. No, seriously. And there's no end in sight. I mean, we're only just past the 6-month mark.
But look at the good news, Brooke. 6-1 now. Mania still
Mets
pitching.
winning 6-1.
Yeah,
that's the good news.
That's
I mean, that's something. I just look at the future with absolute horror, and I don't know obviously what will happen, but I feel that the nation we're facing a very serious problem. Thank you very much to Kim. We appreciate the question. Thank you to all our listeners for spending some time with us today. We encourage everyone to subscribe to the Nova Society on whatever your preferred platform is. Subscribing is free, and we really appreciate it. Do send us your questions and comments. We appreciate those. So for Scott, Mark, and me,
except for the hate mail, you can stop with the hate mail.
Dr. Bell.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, did you ever notice she calls him Dr. Bell? It's you and me, or Scott and Mark. I mean,
all right. Dr. Gershwer and Dr. Bound the Nova Society. Thank you for listening. Stay safe. And we'll see you again next time on the Nova Society.
The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Journal of Interdisciplinary Conflict Science. The JCIS is an open journal for upcoming scholars. The JCIS is currently accepting article submissions on an ongoing basis. The JCIS is a publication of NovaWorks, a scholarly depository at Nova Southeastern University. A link to the journal is in our description.